For when an accident happens, something serious like a plane crash, experts like to talk about the Swiss cheese model to explain how it came to pass. Pretend the accident is failing a test. You do a lot to prevent that from happening, studying in the days leading up to it, getting a good night's sleep beforehand, eating a brain-boosting breakfast the morning of, and making sure your pencils are pre-sharpened and you have an eraser that actually works, instead of one that just leaves messy smear marks on the paper. Those defenses are like layers of cheese, and when they stack up one on top of the other, no hazards can pass through their protective barrier. The thing about this analogy that has never made sense to me is why random hazards are trying to fly through cheese. Oh well. If you have a whole bunch of layers defending against something going wrong, it's almost impossible it will, right? If you study, sleep, eat breakfast, and sharpen your pencils and check your eraser, you're set up for testing success. Except, what if the layers of cheese are Swiss cheese, which everybody knows has holes? Little gaps and big ones. You studied the wrong section, maybe you had insomnia the night before, you overslept the day of and didn't have time for a real breakfast, then your only pencil snapped midway through the test, and its eraser was too dry. One hole in a slice, a crummy, rushed breakfast, isn't going to cause trouble because you still have the other layers of cheese stacked on that piece. But what if holes in those layers of Swiss cheese perfectly line up, even for only one moment? No. Protective barrier. The accident happens. Unprepared, sleepy, hangry, and without a decent writing/erasing utensil, you flunk the test. Several layers of Swiss cheese prevented something from going wrong on our family's low-key, scenic float down the Wolf River. We were on a calm section of the river with barely any rapids. The tubes were all intact and fully inflated. We were all wearing life vests. Our inner tubes were tied together so nobody could drift away. If we did get separated somehow, our parents, Lucy, and Alex all had phones. Lucy was keeping an eye on Alex and me. Pretty quickly, though, our slices of Swiss cheese showed their holes. As soon as we were away from the guide, Alex unsnapped her life vest and flung it into the bottom of the tube. "You're supposed to keep that on," I said, toying with the strap dangling from my waist. I didn't exactly blame Alex. The vests were scratchy and smelled vaguely of fish. Which made sense, considering how often they were dunked in river water. No way. It stinks and looks super dorky. "Alex, there is literally nobody around to see or smell," I said, exasperated. "Except our families, and they've all seen you in footy pajamas. There's nobody to witness my dork vest until I post photos." Alex shook her head at me in a way that said, "Duh. Not like there's an Y reception. How do people even live up here? Must be so boring." I glanced around us. The Wolf River flowed smoothly through a deep, dense old-growth forest, with tall trees lining its banks like watchers at a parade. The leaves and needles formed a patchwork of green, every shade imaginable. The water was more silver-brown than blue, and with the bubbly froth from the current, it reminded me of soda. Birds flitted across the canyon of treetops. It was a truly brilliant blue sky day, and the forest was one of the prettiest environments I'd ever been in. It felt like we were sitting inside of a screensaver image. Who wouldn't want to live up here and get to experience natural beauty like this all the time? I didn't tell that to Alex, though. After sneaking a glance at the front of our tube flotilla to make sure that her mother wasn't paying attention to us, Alex whipped her cover-up over her head and balled it up in her tote bag. She didn't seal the ziplock over it, which made the dry bag sort of purposeless, but I kept my mouth shut. In her teeny bikini, she held up her phone and started checking her angles. "Could you move a little that way?" She pointed, and I scooted left. "More," she said. I guess she wanted to make sure I wasn't in the frame. I dipped my hand in the river, the chilly current massaging my palm. I tried to let the water wash away how annoyed I was feeling. I glanced down at my swimsuit, faded and kind of stretched out in the butt. But I was still comfortable in it. I couldn't imagine wearing something as skimpy as what Alex had on. It seemed impossible to actually swim in that without a bikini fail. I'd be nervous the whole time. I let out a little sigh and tried to focus on the nature around us. But it was hard, especially with Alex jostling the tube to take her selfies. We kept bumping into Lucy's tube because of it. "Hey. Can you guys stop it? Some of us are trying to read," Lucy grumbled, dropping her book to her lap and scowling at Alex. "Oh. My God, are you really wearing that? Does Mom know? Lucy turned toward the rest of the group and raised her hand to wave. Shoo. Don't get her attention. Once I take some pictures, I'm putting the cover up and vest back on. Lucy paused. I won't tell Mom if you stop bumping into me. I'm not doing that on purpose, it's because we're tied together. Alex grabbed the piece of thick, waxy rope that connected us with one loose knot. She easily untwisted it, and with one last push away from Lucy's tube, she set us free. Happy? Lucy picked up her book again. Yes. She readjusted her sunglasses and settled back into her reading position. I'm not sure we're supposed to be untethered, I said quietly, marveling at how quickly Lucy's tube had drifted from ours. Even if I stretched out my arm and hung halfway off the tube, I couldn't have reconnected us. Relax, Jocelyn. Where exactly could we get lost? This isn't, like, the Amazon. I supposed Alex was right. By then, the sun was blazing. I unzipped my backpack and took out my sunscreen to reapply. When I offered it to Alex, she looked like I'd just offered her a lutefisk-flavored fluoride treatment at the dentist. I don't want to mess up my makeup. After I'd recoated my arms and legs and made a thick triangle of chalky goop covering my nose, I pulled out the binocs. Then I sealed my backpack in the dry bag. I fiddled with the dials on the binoculars, setting them so what I could see wasn't wobbly and blurry and I could check out the deciduous trees growing along the other side of the river. When I was doing my Nicolet Forest project, I learned about a kind of special apple tree that first grew along the banks. Did you know the Wolf River apple tree grows fruit that is abnormally big? Like, each individual apple can weigh a whole pound. Alex wasn't listening but held out her phone, waving her arm through the air as she shifted and stretched, searching for a signal. R-E-L-Y? Y-O-U can T just put the phone YF or 3 hours and paw Y at tension to your surroundings. Or me. Yes. She squealed, pumping her free fist in the air. 2 texts just came through. Finally. She hunched over her phone and started typing madly. One of her swimsuit straps was already twisted, proving my point about bikini fails. We were sharing an inner tube, so close to each other our knees occasionally bumped, but it felt like we weren't even on the same plane of existence. I made a silent wish that we'd drift into a no-service zone again, or that she'd at least run out of battery. I went back to scanning the rocky outcroppings and treetops, looking for signs of forest life. Like a nest. Alex. I think there's great blue heron's nest. I pulled the binoculars from my face and held them out for her. Take a look. Yeah, I'm good, she said, waving me away with her left hand while furiously texting with the right. Stuff like this is the whole reason why we're here. I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice. She might as well have stayed in the cabin all day, huddled around the Wi-Fi router like it was a campfire. Is it though? Alex said distractedly. The reason I'm here is because my mom said I had TOB. I curled into my side of the tube. I swallowed hard, feeling a tightening and rawness in my throat that I knew meant I might start crying. But I hadn't cried in front of her at registration day, and I certainly wasn't going to now. Maybe Alex didn't mean to hurt my feelings when she said stuff like that, implying that she was only hanging out with me by force. But it did hurt. A lot. This trip up north was supposed to fix things. We'd have fun together, like we'd had at the Walden end-of-the-year dance, and then she'd remember why we had been best friends in the first place. I knew I'd fallen a little behind Alex, in terms of all that social stuff. I just needed to convince her to give me time now to catch up. But I couldn't do that if she never gave me a chance. Over on her side of the tube, Alex was giggling to herself. The constant upbeat chime of those text notifications pierced the peaceful nature soundtrack. I glanced ahead to see if Alex's phone was bugging the rest of our group. They were alarmingly far downstream, probably because Nolan and Mateo were paddling to go faster. Hey, we should try to catch up with everyone. A bend in the river lay ahead, and for the first time we wouldn't be able to see the rest of our tubing pod once they made that turn. Nobody had noticed that we weren't linked up anymore because Lucy's eyes weren't on us but still fixed on her book, and the boys were so rambunctious, all the parents were busy watching. Alex grunted in response. Seriously, help me paddle. I set the binoculars on top of the dry bag so I could use both arms. Alex leaned over her side of the inner tube, but not to help me. She'd flipped herself so the sun was on her back, bare except for those thin, twisted straps of magenta fabric. I could still see faint tan lines from her old racerback suit, identical to the one I was wearing. But they were so faded. A few more days in the sunshine with that bikini on, and they'd be erased. Which seemed significant, somehow. Meanwhile, our families approached the bend. The water was frothier there, like maybe a small set of rapids was churning it up. The river definitely moved faster after the turn. I could see the current's forceful pull. The thick trees lining the banks had given way to granite-colored rock ledges. Alex. Come on. Could you put down your phone for 1 minute? I didn't bother trying to hide the concern and frustration in my voice. Chill, Jocelyn. Her eyes stayed glued to her phone, its bottom resting against the rounded top of the tube. She muttered something to the screen. Wait, is she talking YTH someone? Laura. I was churning up inside, just like the rapids ahead. I glared at Alex, willing her to face me and see that I was upset. Willing her to care. She kept staring at her phone, fingers dancing across the keypad. Chime, chime, chime. If I heard one more notification, I would implode. Chime. I didn't implode, but the pressure building inside me had to go somewhere. So I slammed down my fist and bounced the tube. On purpose.